Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Pressing Forward Podcast. On today's episode, we have a special guest, Talia Edmonds. Right? Did I say it right?
Yeah,
Right.
that was perfect.
Cool. And you were originally an athlete at Michigan and then transferred to Hawaii. So let the people know who you are, where you're from, and sport you play, everything like that.
Yeah, so I graduated from Michigan State, and so Michigan State and Michigan are huge rivals, and people when you're not familiar with Michigan, they're like, "Oh, like you went to Michigan." I'm like, "No, I went to Michigan State because I don't know, there's a the go green forever." But yeah, so I played 3.5 years at Michigan State. I am an indoor volleyball player. And then when I graduated from Michigan State in 2021, I got to transfer to the University of Hawaii. And I'm currently finishing up my master's here. And I played my final season this past fall. So I got to play two years here at the University of Hawaii. And yeah, now I'm just a regular student out here, and I'm originally from Michigan. I'm originally from Kalamazoo. I was born and raised there, and then went to East Lansing at Michigan State. And people always wonder too, like my connections to Hawaii. My mom was originally born and raised in Hawaii,
Mhm.
and so I kind of grew up. I have a bunch of family out here. Grew up coming back and forth, and so that's ultimately how I ended up transferring out here.
Okay. And just for, I guess for starters, like, how'd you actually like get introduced into the sport? I mean, you mentioned your mom as well too, but how'd you get introduced to it? And kind of what made you kind of stick with volleyball?
Yeah, so both my parents were college athletes. My dad played basketball in college, very small college, but back in Kalamazoo. And then my mom played at the University of Hawaii Hilo, which is on Big Island. Growing up in a athletic family, I played like every sport. I think the first sport I ever did was karate when I was like three, and then I from there I went from like volleyball, basketball, softball, I ran track, like all these different sports. And then in high school I started to specialize. I played football for 1 year. That's like a really ran when I was 8. I was like, "Dad, I want to play football." And he was like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess." And it was the worst year of my life, then looking back. But yeah, so I narrowed it down a little bit more when I got to high school. And I played volleyball, basketball, and softball in high school, lettered in those, and then I threw shot put for a year, and then I played soccer for a year randomly. But I've always loved volleyball the most. I just love the team aspect of it. I was always more naturally kind of competitive in volleyball, and then I love following in my mom's footsteps. She was like my coach in middle
Yeah.
school. So, and she was the freshman coach at my high school. So it was more, I think I always was meant to play volleyball. Yeah, it was the most fun to me.
Um, okay, so and kind of how do you kind of see that impacting your upbringing in general? Like just being an athlete, growing up in an athlete family, like what was that like?
It was super competitive, if that like kind of gives any sort of structural idea. Like everything in our family is we spent weekends just traveling to AAU trips, and we my parents would come to like every event, or they would, if my brother, I have a younger brother who plays basketball in college now as well. But they would, like, if we had events on the same weekend, they would split time, or they always, that's one thing about my parents, is they always found the time to come support my brother and I in our sport. And I think that that's also, it became just a family thing. Like that's how we bonded. That's how we kind of got our lessons taught to us. Our parents, especially my dad, was everything that he taught us was kind of through this lens of sport. And he himself has a nonprofit organization that essentially trains kids speed and agility and stuff like that through sport, and kind of teaching life through sport is his big motto. And I think before the organization even started, it was kind of his philosophy for parenting my brother and I. And I mean, he has two D1 kids now, so I guess
Yeah,
like
worked
it,
out.
it
It's a
worked
little-
out.
Yeah, it
And
definitely.
I like looking back, I used to not like, I used to be like, why is this so intense? And like my dad was just super strict, and just growing up and knowing I wanted to be a Division 1 athlete, like I couldn't do a lot of the stuff that other kids could do. I didn't have as much free time. I was constantly training or focusing on school or all these things. And I didn't quite understand it at the time, but I can definitely look back now and be like, wow, that I'm really grateful that my parents cared enough, but also supported my dreams and my goals as much as they did.
Absolutely. So I feel like for you, it seems like what you're saying is like hindsight is 2020. Like that when you was going through it, you was like, probably not, but now you able to go through it. Now you can kind of see like it was beneficial for you.
For sure, for sure.
So just your commitment to Michigan State, correct? You decided to stay close to home. Why was that?
So actually, it's really funny because junior, senior year, like when I started to think more about recruiting, I kind of had a less traditional path to recruiting because for volleyball, for people who don't necessarily know how recruiting for that works, it's mostly through club, so through AAU and through travel volleyball that college coaches and those big tournaments, they're usually at those big tournaments. And because I played a lot of other sports, I never got a lot of the same exposure as maybe some of the girls who ended up committing, D1 typically. So I kind of flew under the radar for a while. And then when it came around to my senior year and I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go, I didn't have a lot of options. Like I grew up kind of going to some camps, and even though my parents played college sports, they didn't really necessarily know the traditional route to take either. So I would go to some like clinics and some camps to get some college exposure to college coaches. And even then I wasn't getting a lot of um looks, I guess. I was also very undersized. I played all the positions in high school, and I knew when I got to college I would have to specialize more as like a DS libero or like a defensive specialist. And so I think I
Oh,
had one offer.
that terminology just might go over some people.
Okay,
It went over my head a little bit. So hold on, what do you mean by that?
yeah, so like there's typically volleyball, so you have 6 players on the court. You have your outside hitters who are like your bigger, pretty dynamic. They play all the way around. And then you have your middle blockers who are typically like your taller girls who can be more dynamic size, but they just play in the front row. And then your setters who dish out all the balls. They're like your point guard if you're trying to reference like basketball. And then you have the different colored jersey, the girl in the back who is usually smaller
The shorter one.
and
Yeah.
only plays back row. So I'm 5. Yeah, you guys can't tell how tall I'm 5. I tell people 5'7". I'm really like 5'6". But that's relatively, my teammates are like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". There's some big girls. And so yeah, I like all high school, like I was a hitter, but I wasn't gonna go play at the level I wanted to play at as a hitter, and that was just reality. So I kind of had to switch my position to more of a just a defensive specialist.
Mm.
Is that like a little
Yeah.
bit? Yeah,
I
it's so
got it.
funny.
I
I'm like
got
a
it. I got it. Yeah, I got it now. I got
okay,
it.
so yeah, I had one D2 offer outside like my senior year. And it was actually Grand Valley State. I don't know if a lot of people know where that is, but that's in Michigan.
Mm.
And I was like so stuck on like I want to get out of Michigan. I did not want to stay home. I wanted to go somewhere else. I wanted to get like a college experience elsewhere, but I just wasn't getting any of the interest that I needed to like really be confident to like go out. You also, in my position as a defensive specialist, they don't give a lot of scholarships, typically, which is just, that's just kind of how volleyball works. It's changing a little bit now, but yeah, so I had that one D2 offer and I went on a visit there and I really liked it. And they basically were like, yeah, if you come here, we'll pay for it. You can play. And then like God willing, my dad knows somebody who knew the head coach at Michigan State, and they came to like one of my club tournaments, and I like got on a call with them, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll offer you a walk, like a preferred walk on. You won't get any money, but you can come play at Michigan State, which is not only D1, but it also is in the Big Ten, which is one of the best volleyball conferences in the country." And they had just come off of like an Elite 8 year too. And I was like, so I had this choice to make. I was like, do I go D2 and get this paid for? Do I kind of like push my limits and pursue these dreams that I've always had? It's funny. I wish I could show you this picture that when I was in like 7th grade, I had an index card and I wrote "Go D1" on it, and I put it up on my mirror. And like that had been my dream for so long. And so part of that was like, okay, do I now pursue this dream where it's going to be a little bit harder. I don't really know what to expect. And my parents were like, go to Michigan State. They were like, we'll pay, we'll support you. You've been dreaming of this since you were a kid. So I can only really give the credit to my parents for supporting me and then God for even giving me the opportunity to like go to a school I could have never imagined. So it's funny, like the long roundabout answer to that question is I didn't even want to stay at Michigan, but
Yeah.
it was like my only option. And I am so, so blessed. Like you said, in hindsight, looking back, like to even have had that opportunity at Michigan State and to stay in near my hometown, in East Lansing. So yeah.
Was there any so I guess like you said you had the opportunity to fully funded D2 scholarship and then you have a walk-on opportunity, right? Was there any discouragement in getting that walk-on opportunity? Like maybe I should have been worth a full scholarship. What was the feelings there like when that happened?
Yeah, I think I was more just like it was more surreal that I had even had this door open for me. Like I didn't even think I was that caliber of a player to even walk on at that level. And that came from, and this is also throughout my entire career. I feel like every athlete, no matter what the level, can relate to this, is like the confidence you kind of have to develop as you go throughout your career. And we talk about mental health and stuff like that. But confidence was a big part of it, but I had like no confidence. And I really felt like yes, I was athletic. That was like one of the things that I could lean on, but I knew that I was not at anywhere near the level, just the speed of the game and like the technical skills. I just had never had a chance to develop that. And so that's what made me a little nervous, but I was definitely more grateful that I had even gotten that opportunity to step into that gym in that arena, kind of in that space.
And then so even just thinking back on your journey, what would you say was your welcome to college kind of moment? Like, oh, I'm here, like it's real now.
That's a funny question because so also how volleyball works. So we're a fall sport, and so we're on campus basically, especially at Michigan State. We would be on campus from like June all the way up into our season. So we really didn't. We're basically a summer into fall sport. And so when we commit, so I committed that spring of my senior year, which is super late compared to a lot of the other girls. Like the five other girls in my class had all been committed together since sophomore year of high school. Like so I was entering into this class of girls that they didn't even know who I was. Like it was a whole different, kind of assimilating into the culture. But we stepped foot on campus, usually as freshmen, like July 2nd, maybe. And then we start having open gyms. So there's no coaches, it's just strictly team ran. We're lifting and we're conditioning with the coach, but all of our practices are ran on our own. And my first open gym, I was like, I do not belong here. I genuinely just felt like that. It felt the game just felt like a whole different game. Just in terms of the level of play that I had never even seen or been on the same court with. Like you're having these girls who are fifth years in college that had played at this level for 5 years, and then there was me that I had felt like, wow, I barely got this opportunity. So that was that first day that I stepped into that gym. I was like, wow, I have a I have a really uphill battle
Long way
ahead.
to go here, yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the in overcoming all that? Like what was the journey to kind of finding your confidence, building your game? Like what was that for you?
It was a journey. I can tell you that much. It was lots of ups and downs. I'll start at the end where so basically going into that year and I had talked to the coach and the head coach. She was one of the only female also head coaches in the Big Ten. And she had been there for a while and I really respected her. Grew up watching Michigan State volleyball, watching her coach. And I went into her office like one of my first days there and she was like, I'm just gonna be honest with you, you'll probably never play here. Like she was just very straightforward and I didn't take it personally. It was just kind of like at that time I was like, you could be right. Like maybe I won't ever play here. But so I went from that and then fast forward to my senior year where I had been there for 3.5 years. And I was the starting libero and voted team captain like what's unanimously by my teammates. Like so I went from that to this dream that I could have never imagined having happened. And in the middle was a lot of lack of confidence, like lack of self-esteem, but also moments of just like trusting the process and being in the grind. I redshirted my sophomore year because I had a season-ending injury. And I think that I can actually look back and credit a lot of my progress and my journey to that season that I had to sit out and just watch. Like I had to literally just sit on the outside and observe everything. And then it gave me like a little bit more of a fire of like, I can play here. Like I would sit on the side and I would watch them do drills. And I'm like, this is just the same sport that I had been playing since I was 5 years old. Like it gave me a lot of perspective. I guess that's the biggest word is when I could shift my perspective, my journey went from like extreme uphill to more of a like, okay, you know, I can kind of be here and then I can go here and then I can be here and go here. And then maybe there are some downs, but it became more of a consistent uphill, I would say. And I was just more motivated and I set my goals high and my standards high and I had the support to just go for it, and that's kind of how it ended up. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question.
Uh, definitely answer the question. I guess my follow-up to that would be like, because you mentioned having a career-ending injury, right? Like, talk about that. What was the journey going through mentally? Because this athletes that go,
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? It's ACL tears,
yeah.
things like that. So talk about how you was able to kind of overcome some of that, some of those things.
Yeah, and you're right. Like one of the biggest things, and I think you can probably attest to this too, is in mental health, especially for student athletes, it's injury is such a big kind of aspect of it because pretty much every athlete's going to go through injury in their career, and a lot of the times it's the moment that you have to detach your identity from your sport. And I think that that was the biggest thing for me. It was like this reality checkup. So it was I had a stress fracture in my lower back just from like overuse from the sport and the only thing you can do for a lower back injury is rest it.
You got to sit
um
it down.
so yeah, I found that out literally maybe like the first day of preseason practice my sophomore year and of double days, and I that morning practice it just my back hurt really bad and I went to the doctor, got an MRI, and they're just like, yeah, you can't play on this. So that even in that moment it's just like this overwhelming feeling of like, well, now what? Like I had been an athlete my entire life leading up to that point, and I think I was 19 at this time, and it was just like I remember those days following. I literally didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what that meant for my career. I didn't know just what it meant for me as a person. I didn't, it was like all of these confusing things. And throughout that process, it was figuring out who am I outside of volleyball? Like this is one day gonna end. And that's like a reality check. Injury is like a reality check of no matter if you continue to play professionally or if you just play after college, like it will eventually come to an end. And I think a lot of athletes are kind of we're under this impression that we can keep it going and like we can kind of hold on to this thing as long as we can
Squeeze it,
and
squeeze
like
it.
yeah. Yeah. No, see, so and then it was like it was a reality check that that's not the case, that you really have to develop this sense of who you are and what your purpose is in this life without your sport. Like your sport's not your purpose, and I truly believe that. I believe your like sport is just a vehicle for your purpose, for you to like pursue your purpose. And honestly, when I could finally let go of that, let go of my identity, and I'm not saying I was perfect in it by any means, but when I could finally start to let go of my identity, I actually performed better in the sport when I was able to come back because I knew it wasn't like life or death. Like
End
I
all
knew,
be all at that point.
yeah, like I knew that it was I could like keep going and that it wasn't my identity and my world wasn't wrapped up in this ball.
So and even just listening to you speak, you talk about like a lot of purpose. Like for a lot of athletes, how do they? What's that process of finding your purpose? If you don't know your purpose, what was it when you think about your journey? What was it that pushed you to find your purpose? Like what was that? What was that like for you?
It's almost like if you're like at any point you can be kind of forced to find your purpose, which is that's like through injury or just through circumstances that are out of your control. COVID, that's
Right?
a big thing that I
Us,
think yeah, I think everybody, especially athletes, can look back at that time and we couldn't do a lot of stuff that we were used to. And that's everybody in the world. But I think there are things that externally that are going to happen that are eventually going to force you to find purpose outside of your sport. But then you also have this like this choice, I guess, to want to be curious about, okay, what is my life going to look like when my sport's done? I think sometimes that's a scary thought
Yeah.
for athletes, because sometimes we really don't know. And that was a big thing too. As athletes, we're typically also perfectionists and we're planners, and we want to have an idea of where our life is going to go. And then when we don't, it's like, whoa, I
Things change.
was not prepared. Um, and so honestly, purpose, I think you need help to get there. I think that's a big part of it, and that's also why I want to pursue the mental health direction and helping athletes in sport, because I think we need the guidance sometimes. And one of the things that I was really looking for when I had my injury was I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know that there were people, or at least I just wasn't aware of like the resources that we had, and I was less likely to even go look for them, just because also as athletes, and I feel like we're more just self-sufficient. We feel like, we can do things on our own, which is true to some extent, but I also think that it's wise to pursue the support that we have accessible to us. So I think that a big part of finding my purpose like was rooted in my support system. And the people that I had around me, my friends they were so supportive, and just in everything that I was going through, they were there for me, even if they weren't there to give advice, or even if they didn't completely understand what I was going through. They were just supporting me in whatever I was feeling. And I think that that love that I was kind of surrounded by, not only from them, but from my coaches and from the support, like training staff. And I ended up seeing a sports psychologist during my injury, that I was so reluctant to go see him, and then they made me go, and I was like, oh, this is actually exactly what I was looking for. So I think the support, if I had to answer that question, I would think the support in pursuing your purpose is super, super important.
Having the I guess emotional, even not just emotional, but just having the right people around you.
Yes. Yes.
And I know from just seeing, faith is a big component of who you are. Kind of talk about how that ties into your identity and kind of your um, walk as an athlete and now who you are.
It's also really funny. So did you stay at the same university for all your time, or did you transfer at all?
Not a challenge.
Okay, so it's really funny because it's almost like I've lived two lives, like completely. It's so crazy because I'm also literally on an island on like a rock in the middle of the ocean, thousands of miles away from anybody that I know. And that's a whole different thing. Like going to university on an island really separates you from life that you're used to, like life on the mainland, as we call it. But so I had my time at Michigan State, where I had found some success in my career. My career there still didn't end as I would have liked it to, though. Like I ended up not starting as the libero by the end of my career. Like all these different things, I was still team captain, but I was balancing and juggling a lot, and I just hadn't felt like I had fulfilled my athletic purpose at that time. And I was kind of lost a little bit. I would say that too. And then I was able to come to Hawaii and just start over. Like that's literally what I felt like, was I get a fresh start, new people, new environment, new school. I can start my goals fresh. I don't need to be the same person that I was. And I now look back at that as a blessing as well. Just the opportunity to start somewhere new and be so accepted too, because I know that my experience isn't everybody's experience in terms of when they transfer for, or even when they have an injury. And like I had a lot of support, not everybody has that. And so I think that that's why I like to say I'm extremely blessed. But where I am in my faith now, like I have a podcast that is very faith based, and I talk openly about my relationship with Christ, and I am so confident in that. But that's not who I was when I was at Michigan State. Like I was still very much trying to figure it out, and I just say that to encourage people that, I lived the college life. Like I went out every weekend. Like I did things that I just obviously am not very proud of now, but I know that, through Christ we are just in his love, we are saved from those things, and from that life that we were living, and now we're called to walk in a new life. So I truly believe that, and that's, I would say, where I am with my faith now. And it's just funny because I wish only certain people can see me in both lights. Like only certain people were with me when I was at Michigan State and are still with me now. And
Okay.
so I try to really harp on the fact that I have not always been like this. I've done the stuff. I've done all the college stuff, and I know that I'm just grown from that, and that, yeah, like I said, Christ has saved me from some of those decisions that I used to make.
Absolutely. I think it's another thing that's important is just letting for people to know that obviously you're not perfect, right? Like everybody has their flaws and have gone through their own journey to find themselves. So, and it seems like that's what you're talking about here. And uh in thinking about that, like what would be your advice to say like younger athletes or just even athletes in general who might be going through a similar situation, maybe transferring from a different school, trying to find themselves? What kind of advice would you give to them?
I would say like that quote about comparison being the thief of joy. I think that's so true. I think especially now in today's day and age of just social media, and everyone's journey is so public. You can
Mhm.
like we talked about before this, like you can literally go up and look up anybody's accolades and their career, and people are constantly posting about it. And I think that it's easy to want to compare yourself, like, oh, they're there and I'm here, and that means that I'm behind, or that means that I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And I don't think that that's true at all. I think that everybody's journey is their own journey, and I think that where you are right now is exactly where you're supposed to be. And we can get lost in the comparison sometimes. And so I would say that, just as I'm telling you right here that I'm not perfect and my journey was what it was, I had a lot of ups and downs. I think that's very characteristic, and it's more about um how you go through it, like your resilience through it, and your perseverance, and just all of those little things that build your character as you go. So my advice to anybody, no matter where you are, no matter if you feel like you're the most under recruited, or you feel like, you're underappreciated, undervalued where you are, I think that don't compare yourself and your journey to somebody else's, because just make it your own. Like if you look at, oh, she did it this way or he did it this way, and I'm over here like doing it this way, I think that you're just losing some lessons that you could be learning through your own process.
Lot you just said there. I think a lot of gems that could definitely be pulled from that. So when you think about your life journey just beyond athletics, kind of what do you kind of foresee for yourself? Like what aspirations or interests do you have outside of the sport?
Yeah, so I also, this is funny that I was just speaking on my journey too, because when I started college, I was one major, and then I switched my major again, and then I switched my major again, and I finally ended up getting a degree that I was kind of like, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do, and now here I am getting my master's in social work. And I honestly don't even know if I could completely tell anybody what social work exactly is, and that's I don't always, my point to that is like I don't always know what's next, and I think that that's okay too.
Mhm.
To be in a season of just, I don't really know right now, but I'm doing my best with what I have. So, but I now am, I feel like, with God and God's plan for my life, and trying to align just my will and God's will. I really think that I have a heart for just wanting to help athletes, and help athletes with their mental health, because I have just seen through my own experience how hard it can be, and I want to be able to be there for other athletes. So I think the best course of action for that for me will be to pursue my PhD in clinical psychology, and then try to do some research that's strictly focused around athletes, because there's a little bit of a gap in the knowledge and education around the student athlete life. And so I want to help to close some of those gaps, because I've seen the impact that mental health has on athletes.
I think that's awesome. Great little, goals that you got for yourself. That's amazing. Um, so is there anything that you would like to share with other student athletes or just anybody who's listening? Like what's your message for your last message? One piece of
Yeah. I
advice.
want I want to start my last message by just thanking you for having me on here. I think, like, I don't know if everybody knows the context of like your podcast, but this is the first conversation we've ever really had. And I think I felt so just like, so I host my own podcast, and it's funny being on the other side of it. I really have just like, it's cool to know that there are people out there that also have similar goals and interests to me. It's really encouraging. So one, thank you for having me on here. But also I guess the advice that I would give is surround yourself and find find people who have similar interests to you and have similar goals and similar purposes to you, or just like who are going to encourage you to pursue your dreams. And just that, I think that's the biggest things. We are who we surround ourselves with, and I truly believe that as well. And that's a big foundational principle of my podcast, is like the relational aspect. And I just have a lot of my friends on there and we just talk about like a bunch of different stuff, but I love that, you know, I can say that I've surrounded myself with people who push me to be my best and who want the best for me and who love me. And so continue, my advice would be to continue to build your network, because now I feel like, you know, we've been connected, and I love that because now I know that we have just similar aspirations in life. And like I said, that's super encouraging for me.
Absolutely. And it's a pleasure to have you. I appreciate you being here. Where can the listeners connect with you, learn more about your journey, learn more about your podcast?
Yes, so I have so my podcast is called Sacred Sports Souls, and it's available on YouTube. The Instagram for that is Sacred Sports Souls, and then the podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and my personal Instagram as well. If you guys want to get connected with me there, I would love to get connected with anybody that's part of your community too. So you can follow me on my personal Instagram, which is Wiz Khalifa. Made it when I was in 7th grade, but it's just it stuck around with me. And yeah.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna drop everything. I'm gonna drop all her contact, her info. I'm gonna drop it in the bio. So you guys check her out. It's been a pleasure. You shared a lot of gems, and I'm hoping that, you know, if one person at all takes something from your journey, they've learned something. So I've definitely learned more about yourself and just kind of what you've been through. So I appreciate you even joining me on today's show. So
Yeah, thank you so much again. I appreciate it.
absolutely.